The time is 8:35. KCBS presents Harv Morgan Contact. Dial 982-7012 and you're in contact with the stimulating and exciting world of people, ideas, controversy. Contact is for people who are involved. People who are excited by ideas and stimulated by the controversy that grows from a difference of opinion. The program, Harv Morgan Contact. This is Harv Morgan, and tonight you're in contact with the Warren Commission counsels. Now, I've been looking forward, I must say, to tonight's program for many weeks because, as you know, the assassination of John F. Kennedy has become, I guess, and I could also include the resulting Warren Commission report. They have both become almost a hobby, like stamp collecting. And during the weeks and the months, as you recall, that followed the tragedy, there was much speculation as to possible conspiracies, also about such wide-ranging things as a link-up between Oswald and Ruby, between Tippit, the police officer, and Oswald, or between Oswald, for that matter, and the FBI, etc. Now, there were charges that a rich Texas oil millionaire had masterminded a plot to assassinate Kennedy and then to murder Oswald. There was speculative stories that ran the gamut of the imagination. Whatever the imagination could produce could ultimately be turned into a theory on someone's part. Then the report of the Warren Commission came out in October of 1964, and for many people, all the questions were answered in the report. But, and there's a big but, now that the massive 26 volumes of the hearings and the testimonies, as well as the pages, 800 or so pages, I guess, of the book itself, the Warren Commission report, they've all been read, they've been digested and combed by lawyers, by writers, professors, and many others. Now, commencing from this group, we have many critics who are coming forward saying that the Warren Commission report is not all indeed that it should be. You've heard on this and other programs such people as Mark Lane, the attorney who wrote a book called Rushed to Judgment. You heard Mr. Edward Epstein of the book Inquest, Mr. Penn Jones, the Midlothian, Texas publisher who authored an article in the current issue of Ramparts magazine. Also, other magazines like The Nation, like The Minority of One, U.S. News and World Report have been front-covering stories by people like Richard Popkin, Sylvan Fox, Harold Weisberg, Mr. Salandria, Sylvia Marr, both of the writers I just mentioned, writing for The Minority of One. But there have been many columns and thousands and millions, I would say, of words written criticizing the Warren Commission report. So that the people who put together the report of the Warren Commission can have their say and can give the answers that have been asked by these critics. And I'm glad to say that on the program tonight, and unfortunately not here in the studio, because my guests tonight are all in Los Angeles. They were unable, due to legal business, to make it all the way up to San Francisco tonight, but they will be with us for the program this evening to answer your questions and to discuss the report of the Warren Commission on the assassination of President Kennedy. On the contact line will be Mr. Joseph A. Ball, former president of the California State Bar Association and currently the president-elect of the American College of Trial Lawyers. Mr. Ball is a widely respected California attorney. His special area of concern on the staff of the Warren Commission was the events of the assassination day itself, November 22nd of 1963. Also, Mr. Albert E. Jenner, Jr., former president of the Illinois Bar Association and the past president of the American College of Trial Lawyers. His special area of concern on the staff of the Warren Commission was the background of Oswald, the chances of conspiracy, and the motive of the assassination. And Mr. Wesley J. Liebeler. Mr. Liebeler is a former practicing attorney in New York City and is now a professor of law at the University of Southern California. Mr. Liebeler's major area of concern was also the chances that indeed the assassination may have been a conspiracy, the motive of the assassination, and the life of Lee Harvey Oswald. You'll hear from my guest tonight on Contact in just a moment. 15 minutes now before 9 o'clock. Let me say at the outset, before we meet my guest, that because of the nature of tonight's program because there are so many areas of concern to get into, areas of exploration, let's say, that it'll be a little while before we actually get to your telephone calls. A little later than usual this evening because there is so much to consider. Now, if you would like your place on the line, you can go ahead and continue to ring 982-7012. I just felt that it was necessary to warn you a little bit in advance that it'll be a little longer than usual tonight before we start taking your calls. However, I will give you ample warning so that you can get your call in. Now, before we get into a general discussion, I'd like to hear, I guess, opening remarks or comments in general on the Warren Commission report and the criticisms thereof by my guests in Los Angeles. First, Mr. Albert E. Jenner, Jr.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make some general observations, and Professor Lieber will also make some remarks. Mr. Ball is on his way from University of Southern California Law School, where he's been teaching a class tonight, will join us in about another 15 or 20 minutes.
Oh, yes, fine. I'm glad you mentioned that.
What I'd like to say to the public generally is they must view this whole first from the standpoint of the Warren Commission itself. It was charged with a responsibility, which is willingly accepted, of first investigating every possible lead, every rumor, even those that were on their respective faces pretty thin. Assembling all the documentary data that could possibly be assembled, including that which was adverse as well as that which was affirmative. It had the responsibility of making a final choice, that is, of weighing the evidence. The public generally, I think, in viewing these books, which are critical of the Warren Commission report, on the whole, these men have no responsibility for making an ultimate decision. They have no responsibility to weigh this proof. They're interested in selling their books and direct themselves to that end. The Warren Commission itself was composed of men of tremendous stature. Their whole lives were dedicated, as has evidenced by their records, to the public good, and these men were not engaged in the conspiracy. In order to sustain some of the things that are claimed by the book writers, there would have to be a conspiracy of such magnitude that the world has never seen before. Not only the commission itself, these splendid men, but a very competent legal staff, Professor Liebeler and Mr. Ball, myself and others, which at one time got as high as around 40, but the hardcore, the legal staff, was 16 to 20. These men had nothing, as in the case of three men you'll hear tonight, but to go to Washington, spend their time there, assemble these materials and submit them all for consideration by the public generally, law enforcement officers, every kind and nature of person. Now, what the so-called critics of the Warren Commission report have been doing, I think, is a very mischievous thing. They take that which is negative only, or they claim is negative. Much of that, we'll point out tonight, is not negative in nature. They do not advert to the affirmative evidence that convinced the commission, convinced its legal staff that in balancing the proof, that the end result was toward the direction, or absolutely convinced us to come to the conclusions we reached. And the memory of our great president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, suffers, and an injustice is done if the public merely reads these books, because they see then not only one-sided, but frequently distorted representations of some of the evidence and some of the theories they must keep in mind that none of these people have turned up with a single bit of evidence, even if we don't apply the technical rules of evidence. They're all taking the Warren Commission and theorizing and revising it. Jim, you have anything to add?
All right, and before we hear in just a moment from Mr. Wesley Liebeler, we'll be right back at 982-7012 on Contact in just one moment. And now this evening on Contact, in defense of the Warren Commission, our topic this evening here is in Los Angeles, the former practicing attorney in New York City, former staff counsel for the Warren Commission, and currently a professor of law at the University of Southern California, Mr. Wesley J. Liebeler.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, sir.
The first correction, it's pretty hard to keep the record straight. I'm a professor of law at UCLA, not Southern California.
I'll add one more letter to the alphabet.
I think we've got a situation here in the public attitude, the emotional response or attitude toward the Warren report at present, that as near as I can understand it, reflects at least in certain quarters, a general lack of well, we'll call it the credibility gap, if you will. I think there are a lot of people who generally distrust the government and look upon what the government tells them with a very jaundiced and skeptical eye. And I'm not about to suggest that they're wrong about that. I do that myself. And I think you've got a situation where people, for example, they can't tell what's many of the real facts as to what's going on in Vietnam or what the CIA operations are overseas in Thailand or somewhere else. And they get frustrated about this. They can't understand these things. They can't know these things. So they a lot of them turn to the Warren Commission. And here you've got a sort of a finite universe. You've got 26 volumes of material, and these people are burrowing into this material, and if they can find something that just isn't exactly right, or if they can interpret it in their own way so as to indicate that the Warren Commission hasn't told them the whole truth, then they can take out all their frustrations and all the pent-up feelings that they have against the government generally and focus it on the Warren Commission, on the Warren report. And I think this, from a psychological point of view or from an emotional point of view, explains the attitude of a lot of people toward the Commission at this time. It's unreasoning. There's no analysis of the facts involved here. There's almost a paranoid reaction to the thing that I find to be most amazing.
And we'll continue this in just a moment this evening in defense of the Warren Commission on Contact.
You're listening to Black Op Radio.
On Harv Morgan Contact tonight in defense of the Warren Commission. So far on the contact line to Los Angeles, we've heard from Mr. Albert Jenner and Mr. Wesley Liebeler, both formerly of the Warren Commission staff. Let me just check. Mr. Jenner, is Mr. Ball joined us yet?
No, not yet.
All right, just let me know when he does come in so we can have any remarks that he might care to make.
All right.
I wonder, one of the areas that I think that we should get into for a moment here before getting into the calls from our listeners is, I guess, a discussion of the methods used by the Commission and staff. And I say this because one of the critics, particularly the man who wrote Inquest, Mr. Epstein, it was, yes, has said that this was a superficial job, that it was done in about 10 weeks, that really you weren't staffed, nor were you had the time, really, to do a competent and a thorough job of investigation.
Well, let me start on that, and then Professor Liebeler can follow. Mr. Epstein is absolutely wrong. I came to Washington the last week in January 1964 and left Washington the last week in September 1964. The investigation was already proceeding when I got there because I had been hospitalized with a torn tendon and couldn't get down to Washington before the last week in January. That investigation continued. As a matter of fact, I took depositions. I think the last depositions that were taken in examining witnesses in September of 1964. So that the investigation went on at least January through September 1964, and preliminary work was done even prior to that time. Mr. Epstein, when I think he fixes sometime in March, isn't it, Jim? As the commencement of the investigation, and then it was completed in 10 weeks.
Mr. Jenner, could you speak a little bit closer to the mouthpiece? We're having a little bit of difficulty.
As a matter, well, he's very much wrong in that respect. Now, on the methods of the commission itself and its legal staff, the staff was nevertheless fewer than 16 lawyers. We had available to us United States attorneys and staff people throughout the country, FBI and Secret Service people, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Corps, intelligence services. We had CIA when information was desired. We had the State Department, Immigration and Naturalization Service. We had a large staff of people in Washington. As a matter of fact, we took over the VFW building during all those months. And whatever facility we wanted was immediately turned over to us. I know that Mr. Liebeler especially will recall the many contacts he had with the FBI. Anything he asked for, anything we asked for, was immediately produced. The witnesses were examined before the commission. They were interned. Others, many of them, a great many of them, examined by staff counsel of experience in trial work and taking of depositions throughout the country. Nobody that we wanted, we were unable to get. We were able to run down everyone, serve them with subpoenas, or have them appear voluntarily. Thousands and thousands of pages of testimony are printed in the 15 testimony volumes and the many exhibits in the remaining of the 26 supporting volumes. Mr. Epstein, a student who was writing a master's thesis, hardly is in a position to judge, especially from the statement he made as to the methods of the legal staff and the commission itself. Obviously, from what he says, he doesn't have any notion of the amount of work that was done by the commission. Jim?
Well, I think there isn't much to add to that. I think that Mr. Epstein has a somewhat naive notion of what constitutes an investigation. You don't just call an investigation that portion of your work when you go out and question witnesses. And even if you limit the investigation to the taking of depositions, that went on from March most heavily for 10 to 12 weeks, but then on into September.
Jim, I remember you going down to Dallas in as late as the latter part of August, or may have been early September, taking some supplemental depositions down.
Yeah, but right. But the basic point, it seems to me, is that the greater part of an investigation consists of analyzing the materials and going through it to figure out the questions you have to ask, and that went on long before March. Epstein starts to count the investigation in March, but we had rooms full of FBI and Secret Service reports that we had to analyze and go through beforehand, and that was all done. As a matter of fact, he dates the beginning of the investigation with the end of the Ruby trial. But of course, that's nonsense, because we were analyzing these materials and preparing to take depositions long before that, all throughout January and February.
Let me just ask you this, because that has a bearing on the very thing that we're talking about right now. By the way, this is KCBS, AM and FM, the voice of San Francisco. In Mr. Epstein's book, and I have reference to page 73 now, he mentions you, Mr. Liebeler, and also Mr. Ball, in direct connection with the kind of investigation and with the cooperation of the FBI. And he says, and I'm quoting, Joseph Ball said that FBI agents cooperated only under express orders from Hoover. Wesley Liebeler said that although the FBI was extremely efficient in answering questions submitted in writing, the agents would not develop any information that was not specifically requested of them.
I think that's just a description of the way the FBI works. It's obviously a bureaucratic organization. The purpose of the commission was to pose the questions, to ask the questions, and when we wanted somebody to go out and provide the answers, we asked the FBI to do it. And as I said, they were very efficient in doing precisely that. The FBI agents, when an FBI agent goes out to conduct an interview or to conduct an investigation, he's given instructions to what he's supposed to find out and what the basic questions are. And that's just the way the FBI or any investigative agency like that the way they operate.
Yes, and Jim, when we found inconsistencies or we had any doubts even about those reports, then we
Mr. Jenner, we can't quite hear you.
By the way, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Ball has come in.
Oh, fine, then we'll give him just a moment and take this break and then right back on Contact in a moment. 6 minutes now past 9 o'clock, and before moving along to other areas of discussion and also to your calls at 982-7012, which will be a little later in getting to this evening, I'd like to hear now any opening statements or remarks to be made by my third guest, the former president of the California State Bar Association, currently the president-elect of the American College of Trial Lawyers, Mr. Joseph A. Ball, who is a widely respected, of course, California attorney. His special area of concern on the staff of the Warren Commission was the events of the assassination day itself. Mr. Ball?
Well, yes, I've been a little late getting in this evening. How far have you progressed in your questioning?
We've only covered a few areas. I just wonder for openers if there's any general observations on the Warren Commission report, or more specifically the criticisms of the report that you'd like to make.
Well, most of the criticisms I read by Lane, Epstein, and others were irresponsible criticisms not based upon any facts. Mr. Epstein, I remember in one instance, said that the investigation took 10 weeks. I arrived in Washington on January 6th, and I worked 7 months steady at the investigation. Mr. Epstein quoted me 19 times in his book, and yet I talked to him just for a short few minutes maybe 20, 30 minutes in a New York hotel lobby in 1965, and yet I'm quoted verbatim 19 times with quotes that I can't even recognize when I read them.
Well, and you didn't keep any notes either, did he?
He didn't keep notes, and I protested by letter twice to his publishers.
Now, the keeping of notes actually leads us into, I think, a very important area of criticism that has been leveled against not specifically the Warren Commission, but against the investigation into the death of John Kennedy. And that was during the time that Lee Harvey Oswald was in custody in Dallas, that we have very little information, almost no records kept, really, of the interrogation that went on at that time. The criticism has been something like this. Well, it's totally inconceivable that in this day and time that anything resembling a modern police station, and especially with the FBI and the Secret Service there, that tape recorders or some manner of recording the evidence of the interrogation wasn't used, such as stenographic records.
Well, the contrary is true, and that is that in most modern police departments, they do not and have not used tape recorders. And when Oswald was questioned by the Dallas Police Department, the interrogation, of course, occurred 3 or 4 times over a period of 2 days, at which FBI agents were present as observers, primarily. The notes were kept by Captain Fritz, but there was no mechanical recording of the statement, nor was there any stenographic report taken.
Well, that's the thing.
Because of the fact that Oswald said very little.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not general practice, not usual practice.
It's not general practice to do so, and they call a stenographer in if a defendant wishes to make a formal statement. Otherwise, they do not.
But we might think that due to the magnitude of this, that almost immediately someone would have thought this must be preserved for history. So to have a stenographer, almost at your elbow at all times.
Well, I think you have the benefit of a good deal of hindsight when you make that
suggestion. Yes, and Mr. Morgan, you want to keep in mind that this is a discussion of the Warren Commission report, and the Warren Commission wasn't in existence at that particular time, and this hasn't any bearing upon the quality of the Warren Commission report. And,
was this, as a matter of fact, and I don't know, so let me ask, was this taken up in the report of the Warren Commission?
The subject matter of the message of the Dallas police?
Yes, sir.
Well, there are references to that in the report, certainly. Can't pick them out for you right at the moment, but we certainly would have been fine if we had tape recording, although there might have been some question about ability to use it, because tape recordings of Oswald's questioning, in view of the fact that he was the suspect under decisions of the United States Supreme Court interpreting the federal Constitution, would be highly doubtful they could ever be used.
Mr. Jenner, on the particular phone that you're using, we can't hear you very well unless you're speaking right into the mouthpiece.
Well, I'm doing my...
Oh, that's much better. Fine.
Well, the commission certainly never apologized for the performance of the Dallas Police Department. There's no question about that. And anybody that wants to judge the Warren Commission on the basis of the Dallas Police Department's performance is certainly missing the mark by a wide margin. Let me say that.
Mr. Morgan, that's what we lawyers call a red herring. It doesn't go to the merits of the investigation made by the Warren Commission report. Warren Commission and its staff.
All right, there's one area we'd like to get into of the direct discussion of a direct piece of investigation done by the Warren Commission. We'll do that in just a moment.
You're listening to Black Op Radio.
This is Harv Morgan Contact at 982-7012. Very shortly, we'll be taking your calls. My guests on the contact line, Mr. Albert Jenner, Mr. Joseph Ball, and Professor Wesley Liebeler, all former staff members of the Warren Commission on the report of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Now, there's one area that keeps popping up, gentlemen. It's is a part of almost every criticism made, and that is the famous single bullet theory. Exhibit number 399, the bullet that was supposedly, or according to the Warren Commission, let me say, was the bullet that traveled through President Kennedy and then traveled all the way through Governor Connolly and ultimately wound up on a stretcher in the hospital. How strong is the evidence, in your collective opinion, that indeed this bullet was the bullet that went through both bodies?
Jim, you want to take that?
Well, I think that preliminarily you have to ask yourself the question: if this explanation of the event is not correct, which explanation seems to be more likely? The commission conducted. Well, first of all, it's clear, and the first criticism, the first point that's made here, is that the bullet did not, in fact, pass through the president's body. Epstein makes a point of this in his book. I think it's on page, he's got a statement on page 55, about page 55 of his book, in which he says that in order for the argument is that the bullet entered so low in the back of the president that it could not have exited from the throat, as the commission concluded that it did on the basis of the autopsy findings, the findings of the autopsy conducted at the hospital. Now, Epstein based his argument primarily on the location of the holes, the defects in the president's clothing. And he has one sentence in there in which he says that in order for the hole in the clothing, in the shirt particularly, to have matched the wound in the body, the shirt would have to be raised 6 inches, collar and all, on the body. Now, of course, that's absurd. It's impossible for a shirt to be raised in such a manner. Now, I discussed this question with Mr. Epstein last summer in New York. As a matter of fact, over the 4th of July weekend, we had dinner together with some friends. And I asked him, I mean, it's perfectly obvious, if you're going to make a statement like this, that you have to locate the wound in the body before you can decide whether the shirt has to be raised or lowered to match the wound in the body. And I asked Mr. Epstein where he had located the wound in the body to make this determination as to whether or not the hole in the shirt matched it. And he said, well, I always assumed that it was at the top of the collar line. And it turned out, as a matter of fact, that Mr. Epstein had never made the measurements on his own body or on anybody else's body to locate to pinpoint the precise location of the wound that was in the president's body. The autopsy report indicated clearly that it was 14 centimeters, that's 5.5 inches, below the bony tip behind your right ear, and about 2 inches to the right of the spinal column. Now, when you take a shirt and pull it down on your body, and I invite any one of your listeners to do this, just take the shirt and pull it down as tightly as you can, and measure 5.5 inches down from that bony tip behind your right ear. When I do it on myself, it comes the mark on the shirt comes 3 inches below the collar line. And then when you raise your shoulders up ever so slightly and hump the shirt up and raise your arm to the position that the president was in at the time and measure it again, the mark on the shirt comes 5.5 inches below the collar line. And that's just 1/4 of an inch from where the hole was actually in the president's shirt. And that wound, when located in that way, by measuring it as the autopsy surgeons indicated, and locating it that way in the body, it's higher on the back than in the front. So it's clear that the bullet entered the base of the president's neck, traveled downward, and exited at the throat. And this is also supported by the fact that the FBI laboratory, in examining the clothing, found that the fibers on the back, or the hole in the back of both the shirt and the coat, were bent inwards, which would be the result of an entrance wound. And in the front, on the shirt, the tear in the shirt, the fibers were forced outwards, which is the result of an exit wound. Now, the bullet went through the president in this manner. The governor was sitting right in front of him. And when the bullet came out the president's throat, traveling at a downward angle, it either would have had to have hit the car or the governor, because it wasn't deflected in the president's body. It hit nothing. It just passed through flesh. It hit no bones or anything. It didn't hit the car, so it would have had to have hit the governor. And it did hit the governor. And it passed through the governor's chest, chipped away part of his rib, and by this time it started to tumble. It was turning end over end when it came out the front of the governor's chest. It made a large hole in the front of the governor, and it hit his wrist. Probably it hit the wrist, since the nose of the bullet is not deformed and the bullet was tumbling. It probably hit the wrist at a time when it was either going sideways or backwards. Probably backwards. Passed through the wrist, shattered the wrist fairly severely, and lodged in the thigh. Now, the commission conducted a series of tests, and the autopsy and the surgeons in Dallas testified that the governor's wrist was not injured by a bullet that had been fired directly from a rifle, because it was not injured severely enough. The bullet had slowed down and it was tumbling. It was not a pristine bullet. When you take all of these things and put them together, it seems quite clear that, as a matter of fact, the bullet that did pass through the president's neck did go on and hit the governor and pass through his body and lodged in his thigh. Now, there's nothing extraordinary about it at all, as a matter of fact, because when the commission conducted tests to see if the bullet had power enough, it's clear that it did. And the question of the weight loss in the bullet and any defacing we can take up if you want to pursue those questions.
All right, because this single bullet seems to be at the heart of so much of the criticism, let me for a moment play the devil's advocate and look at it, if I can, from the eyes of the gentlemen who have been propounding these alternate theories. For example, Mr. Epstein now. He points out that in one of the exhibits, if we're going to look on one page of Mr. Epstein's book, where he shows the president's coat and the president's shirt, and indeed, to an untrained eye, it looks as though it's pretty far down the back, about between 5 and 6 inches down from the top of the collar of the coat.
That's where it is, 5.5 inches, 5 and 7/8 inches.
And then we look at Commission Exhibit 386, which shows the bullet entering a back of a drawing right at the base of the neck. Actually, it would be rather hard to visualize a bullet going through a shirt that low on the shirt, 5 inches down the middle, and entering at the position that Commission Exhibit 386 shows it, quite a bit to the side.
You're talking about 386 or 385?
386. Right.
That's the one that shows the defect in the back of the head and also the hole in the base of the neck.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't have them in front of me, but I recollect them.
And then looking at Commission Exhibit number 397, which is a drawing by, was this one by Dr. Hume?
Well, that's the face of the autopsy sheet. It shows the front view and a back view of a body, and it shows a mark on the back, and it also has certain measurements noted in the margin, does it not?
Yes, and the mark on the back is considerably down the back.
Yeah, but it has a measurement
the measurement's right in the margin.
The measurement is right in the margin.
And how far down is that?
14 centimeters. It says right there. You can read it. 14 centimeters from the right mastoid process, and 14 centimeters from the tip of the right acromion process, and that's 14 centimeters, which is 5.5 inches below the bony point behind the right ear, and 5.5 inches from the tip of the shoulder, joint. And that's right on the right upper hand side of that face sheet, is it not? Right mass process.
Yes, it is. And in that position, I would say that it would be difficult to see in the mind's eye, looking at the erect body standing up like that, how the bullet could enter there, and it would seem to be have to travel up. It would seem, I would say, to the naked eye, to get up to the exit position, which was right at the place where the tie was.
Well, any lawyer will tell you that when you've got a situation like that, is that the measurement, the written measurement that was made by the doctor on the body of the president is the controlling event, the controlling measurement. Now, the doctor made the mark on the back. He made it during the course of the autopsy, but the fact matter is that the most precise way in which to determine the location of the wound is to take a measure and measure on your body or somebody else's. the measurements that were indicated in the margin, and that shows you where the wound is, and it's right at the base of the neck. As a matter of fact, it is somewhat higher than that spot that's on the face of the autopsy sheet. Try it. I invite any listener to try it, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
All right. Now, we have some listeners waiting on the contact line. Speaking of listeners that we'll get to in just a moment, we have other areas of discussion that I'd like to get into. Let me check with my guests, Mr. Ball, Mr. Jenner, and Mr. Liebeler, before we go to the questions of listeners. Are there any other areas specifically you would like to get into right now?
Go ahead.
Well, I'll say this, that Mr. Epstein thinks that he has discovered something. I saw the clothing of the president the first week I was in Washington. And all of these ideas that you've been suggesting now occurred to us because we're all trained in the investigation and analysis of fact. And we specifically, Mr. Spector asked Dr. Hume about this same problem. Matter of fact, Mr. Spector and I talked to Dr. Hume. We were the first ones to talk to him early in February 1964.
He's the doctor that performed the autopsy.
Performed the autopsy.
And what did he say?
He explained to us, just as Mr. Liebeler has. If you have your coat and your shirt pulled down, it's a certain position of the back. But if you raise your shoulder, especially if you're muscular, if you're well muscled, and you raise your hand up as the president's hand was, waving to the crowd, you'll find both shirt and coat come up toward the base of the neck. Try it yourself. Mr. Liebeler has measured it in front of Mr. Epstein and shows that it doesn't have to come up 6 inches. It only has to come up 2 or 3 inches to comply.
To be consistent with
Certainly
the
be consistent with the autopsy.
Well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Epstein and I did a television show in New York last summer on this, and he was constrained to admit after I showed him the shirt, we had it on the camera. He was kind enough to admit that as he said, quote, clarified his thinking somewhat, quote, which is perhaps a scholarly way of understating the fact that he admitted that he was dead wrong.
All right, we'll get to your calls in just a moment at 982-7012 on Contact. The number's 982-7012 on Contact tonight. In defense of the Warren Commission report, our contact topic. On the line to Los Angeles, Mr. Albert Jenner, Mr. Joseph Ball, and Mr. Wesley Liebeler. All three of these gentlemen, attorneys, and all three served as counsels on the staff of the Warren Commission. Now, let me just request once more, because, gentlemen, we have 3 lines to you in Los Angeles there. It'll be necessary for you to talk quite closely to your mouthpieces. Otherwise, we will not be able to hear you at full volume. Let's have that first call, 982-7012. This is Harv Morgan. You're in Contact.
Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to remember something Mark Lane stated in his book, Rest of Judgment. It was something to this effect, that the Warren Commission stated that the president was shot 3 times in something like 6 seconds. Yet when the gun that Oswald used, or supposedly used, was given over to an expert to test, they found out that the fastest that gun could be shot and reloaded accurately was 3 seconds a shot.
No, it was 2.3 seconds a shot.
Oh, pardon me. So, I'd like to know what they had to say about that.
All right, this is another big area of discussion, gentlemen.
Well, the president was only shot twice, only 2 shots hit. So just taking her question at face value, there's a period of 5.6 seconds there between the time the president seems to have been struck first and the time he was struck second. The second time, and it takes 2.3 seconds to operate the bolt and to aim the rifle. That gives you 4.6 seconds, so there's time enough right there by itself. Now, you also have to take into consideration the fact that you don't count the first time that you operate the bolt here, because that doesn't show up in the time span. You operate the bolt, and then you aim, and then you fire the first shot, and then you have 5.6 seconds to operate the bolt and fire the second shot. So, as a matter of fact, while the rifle could be fired within 2.3 seconds, in fact, there was 5.6 seconds available for him to operate the bolt and fire the rifle.
Which bullet, indeed, was it that struck first? The first shot, or the second, or what?
Well, you can't really tell from looking at them. But we're talking about the motion picture film here. It's possible that the second shot did miss. Now, if that's true, then you have to fire 2 shots within 5.6 seconds. But that's still possible because there's an extra second in there. But it seems most likely, as a matter of fact, that the first shot missed, and that then there was 5.6 seconds just in which the bolt had to be operated only once. But in any event, there's more than enough time to fire the rifle 3 times during that period, because you don't count obviously, the first time. You don't multiply by 3 here, you multiply by 2. Because the time span is determined from the time the first shot strikes, and the time needed to operate the bolt the first time is not included in that. Then you've got either 2 or 3 more shots. The bolt has to be operated either once or twice, and you've got almost 6 seconds, 5.6 seconds in which to do it, so you can do it either once or twice. There's no problem in terms of the time.
Mr. Lane made much in his book of the fact that the experts that the Warren commissioners had try this, the FBI expert and I believe an Army expert, couldn't do it, in fact, in less than, I think he said 6.6 seconds for one. Another one did it in 7 seconds, but none of them could approximately come close to Oswald's time.
Well, that's not so. It took some of them a longer time, but many of them did it in a shorter period of time. And one of the points he makes is that some of them missed one of the shots, but I don't know what you make out of that, because it's perfectly clear that Oswald did too. I mean, I don't think you can make very much out of that. It's perfectly consistent in terms of the time sequence involved here, in terms of 2.3 seconds to operate the bolt, and that's not the minimum time at all.
Well,
as a matter of fact, it was very amusing. I saw a television show the other night, and Lane, has these props. He carries this rifle around with him. When he gets on television, he shows it. And he made an interesting mistake. I don't know how many people noticed it. As a matter of fact, it's on this 3-hour program that he's on. He operated the bolt on the television. And let me tell you, it didn't take him 2.3 seconds to do it. It was just like that, less than a second. It was fascinating.
Was that including the aiming and reloading and everything?
No, it was just operating the bolt. Mm-hmm. That's the reloading. Yeah, the aiming would take a little bit longer, but in terms of operating the bolt, it doesn't take anything like 2.3 seconds.
That's right.
All right.
Remember, the gun was on a rest too, on a box.
So it was steadied. Yeah, that's
So
right.
it was steadied on a box.
So that would lower the re-aiming time. It was steady and didn't have to be re-aimed. It wasn't thrown off by the shot nearly as much as if it were just being held.
All right, we'll have the next call in just a moment at 982-7012. This is KCBS, AM and FM, the voice of San Francisco. 26 now before 10 o'clock on Contact. Let's have the next call at 982-7012. Go ahead. What's your question?
Yes, well, my question is, since a man went into a car lot and gave the name of Lee Oswald, so that in a few weeks he'd have enough money to buy a car, and a man also went to a rifle range and gave the name of Oswald and made himself conspicuous and obnoxious by shooting at other people's targets, and the commission proved that this wasn't the Lee Harvey Oswald, did they ever consider the possibility that someone was using Lee Harvey Oswald's name to build up evidence against him?
Professor Popkin, of course, advances this theory to a great extent in his book, and he points out these things. Gentlemen, what is the answer to this?
You're listening to Black Op Radio.
When he heard that Oswald
Had been arrested.
Yeah, I remember that.
But he was not corroborated. He said that his boss would corroborate him, but when we took the deposition of the boss, he didn't corroborate.
Yes, I took that testimony, and the boss did not corroborate him, and anybody that has experience in testing facts of witnesses, when a witness comes up with a story that he wrote a name down, but he threw it in the wastepaper basket, then you know that there's something wrong with that. Now, also, your friend does not read the testimony, for example, of Mrs. Payne, who attempted to teach Oswald how to drive an automobile.
Well, the argument here, Bert, is that it was somebody else trying to frame Oswald in some way. I don't know exactly.
Yes, Popkin says that, therefore, this would prove that there was a second man impersonating Oswald. As a part of this, advancing this argument, he points...
And that's the most simple-minded notion, really. That's the kind of thing that anybody, you can always make up to it. Why not 3 Oswalds? I mean, that of course, can explain all these things. Now, I'm sure these people did see somebody that maybe looked something like Oswald. There's lots of people in Dallas that have the same general configuration that Oswald does. You'd be surprised. Go down there, you see them all over the street.
Sure, there are a lot of them here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's right.
But what the this preposterous theory hasn't anything but imagination to back it up.
That's right.
What possible part of that? How would you further the conspiracy by impersonating Oswald in buying an automobile or in going to a rifle range and shooting?
So then the commission decided that even though Bogard said that the man called himself Lee Oswald, this was a product of his hindsight?
I think it's part of the it's not corroborated by any other real evidence.
Well, it was denied by the very people that he asked to corroborate it.
Yeah.
They contradicted him, and we just We didn't find the evidence credible. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Simple psychology, Mr. Morgan, of witnesses in these terrible events. They just imagine these things, and once having told the story to somebody, they will not back down, and they begin then to embellish it.
Well, they believe it. They come to believe it.
They come to believe it. But when you examine them and examine other evidence, then you know that it wasn't possible. Now, one other thing, Oswald was not even in Dallas on this particular occasion. Mr. Liebeler and I questioned witnesses, Mrs. Payne and Marina and others. He was, in fact, in Irving, Texas at this particular time, and so he couldn't have been at this show play.
If anybody's going to try to convince somebody else it was Oswald, they'd have to deal with his presence somewhere else, you see, and his presence was explained somewhere else, so it couldn't have been Oswald. Therefore, any attempt to make you believe that it was would obviously fall on its face, wouldn't it?
One of the other writers, this Sophia Mager, also, and her story makes much of this point. She says that the Bogart story was corroborated by Frank Pizzo, the sales manager there, and Orrin Brown and Eugene Wilson.
It was not corroborated by Pizzo.
Quite the contrary.
He contradicted a very essential part of his testimony. That he...
What purpose would be served? Let's ask this question. We get off in the area of fantasy here, and it's pretty hard to deal with when you're starting to talk about fantasy as opposed to fact. But what purpose would be served by somebody coming in and purporting to impersonate Oswald in a car shop or on a rifle range or anywhere else, when in fact, many of these times, Oswald was not only not in Dallas, he wasn't even in the United States, and it was perfectly clear that he wasn't. Now, how could these people make anybody believe that Oswald was out practicing on the rifle range when he was in Mexico? The whole thing's absurd, because his presence is explained by the fact that he was somewhere else.
And what does it mean? What does it lead to? I don't understand the purpose of these imaginings anyway. They wouldn't in any way change the result of it, or the conclusions drawn.
Well, I guess the thing that the writer was aiming at, of course, was a conspiracy theory that...
Yes, but you can make up, Mr. Morgan, I said at the outset, the commission staff, 3 of them whom you have on these phones tonight, upwards of 20 in addition. The commission itself had the responsibility of assembling facts and reaching a conclusion, not going off in wild theories of the possibilities, unsupported by any facts and absolutely contradictory to known and solid facts. Now, this commission was a responsible commission, not writing a book of theory that...
Well, I'm not going to ask anybody to believe the Warren report simply because we're responsible people, Bert. I'm going to ask them to examine the evidence and make their own determination about it. And if anybody can make a plausible argument as to what sense or what purpose there is in this that has any relationship to reality, I'd be more than happy to be convinced by it, but I haven't heard it yet, certainly not from Professor Popkin.
If we drew conclusions as Professor Popkin from as little evidence as he has drawn, then there'd be some sense in criticizing our work.
Well, I expect we ought to be put in a neuropsychiatric clinic.
I'd voluntarily go in it myself.
All right, we'll voluntarily take the next call in just a moment at 982-7012.
Conservationists are rallying behind Ronald Reagan for governor. Last week before the Commonwealth...
inadvertently taken of the assassination. This picture was impounded by the investigatory...
Just a minute, sir. That wasn't a motion picture. Wasn't that Polaroid pictures?
I am not...
You're Mary Mormon. Aren't you speaking of her?
A woman.
Yes.
Quite upset at the time.
Are you speaking... you must be of her, sir. It wasn't motion picture. It was still Polaroid pictures.
Polaroid film. Overexposed.
They were overexposed?
I believe the press, I think.
The Associated Press, it was shown all over the nation. It wasn't... Yeah. So it wasn't... it was sold to one of the newspaper agencies.
I mean, it was Featherstone bought it for AP, and it was in every newspaper in the country the day after the assassination.
All right, sir, and your question then is what?
It wasn't put forth then as a portion of the Warren Commission report?
Oh. No, this is the picture that showed the school book depository itself. Is that the one you're talking about?
Is that the one, sir?
I believe that would be the one.
Well, that's the one that Mark Lane mentions, but Mark distorts the facts on this like he does everything else. He doesn't tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, there was a picture. It's not clear when the Mormon picture was taken, but it is a fact that she did sell that picture for $600 to a man by the name of Featherstone from the Associated Press. And if you go back and look in the newspapers at the time, you'll see that picture in the newspaper. Now, the commission didn't put it in the report because it had a better picture that was taken almost exactly at the time of the assassination or shortly thereafter by a fellow by the name of Dillard, who was riding was a newspaper photographer.
Yeah, he was a press photographer,
yeah.
Jim.
And he took a picture of the building immediately after the shots were fired. And it's set forth in the report. I don't happen to have a copy of the report in front of me, but it's Dillard Exhibit C, and it's right in the middle of the report. And it shows the depository building, and it shows Norman and Jarman, or Norman and Jarman Williams. There's two of them that you can see in the picture. And it shows the sixth floor corner window, and it's open, but it doesn't show anybody in the window. That's quite right. And the commission is not trying to hide the fact that there aren't any pictures showing anybody in the window. It published a Dillard photograph that was taken almost immediately after the assassination, and it doesn't show anybody in the window. But the fact of the matter is that one of Dillard's friends, the guy that was with them, what was his name, Johnson or something like that?
In the press car.
Yeah, they saw the rifle sticking out there.
Well, he saw it, and he said there's a man with a rifle in the window.
Yeah.
Then when Dillard took the picture right afterwards.
And apparently at that point the man was gone, but they saw him.
Was there any evidence? Before I do that, let me take this momentary break and right back in just a moment.
You're listening to Black Op Radio.
And again, gentlemen, on the contact line to Los Angeles, apparently, Mr. Jenner, on your phone only, we're having a little difficulty, and when you do speak right into the mouthpiece, we can hear you. When your mouth gets off, we have difficult time in hearing you.
I'll do the best I can. I'd like to return to that photograph.
All right, fine.
Mr. Couch, he was in the press car, and he testified that he saw the rifle in the window. Thomas Dillard, the chief photographer of the Dallas Morning News, was in the press car facing the TSBD building, and the testimony is, and after the third shot, Bob Jackson, who was, as I recall, on my right, yelled this, look up in the window, there's the rifle. And I remember glancing up to the window on the far right, which at the time impressed me as the 6th or 7th floor, and seeing about a foot of a rifle the barrel being brought into the window. And Couch testified that he saw people standing in the other windows underneath. And the mayor of Dallas and Mrs. And the wife of Cabell, Mrs. Earl Cabell in the motorcade, immediately behind, seated there, glanced up and saw that. Now you'll find at page 66 of the report, as soon as Dillard saw the rifle being withdrawn, and the other witnesses whose names I've given
Couch
you.
saw the
Couch. Dillard took this photograph, and there it is on page 66, and the two men who were below on the 5th floor, right under the 6th floor window, are shown in the photograph. So the photograph was taken very promptly afterward, and these are the men who also testified,
Norman and Williams,
that they heard the shots from above them. They looked up, they heard the spent hulls of the three bullets strike the floor above them, and those three spent hulls were found there on the floor of the sixth floor at that window as soon as people got out. The policeman and Roy Truly, the superintendent of the Texas School Book Depository, got up there to find them.
It's too bad that Dillard didn't take the picture a little bit sooner, because he would have had a picture of the rifle. But there's no question but what he did take the picture, and the commission put it in the report, even though it didn't show anybody in the window. I don't understand the thrust of this criticism of the.
I think the thrust was, and again, getting back into the devil's advocate chair and pretending to be Mr. Lane, his presentation seemed to be that since this indeed was a Polaroid picture, that therefore Mrs. Mormon saw undoubtedly the picture. She had a chance to actually see it, and he says that the 6th floor corner window was shown in the picture. Therefore, why wasn't Mrs. Mormon called as a witness before the commission? This was the thrust of his criticism.
Well, we had her statement to the FBI, and we had her picture, and it didn't show anything.
Didn't show anything at all.
She didn't see anything. She didn't take a picture of the window. She took a picture of the motorcade, and it happened to include the window. She didn't claim she saw anything in the window.
No, but Mr. Lane's point was that if it showed the window, did it show anyone there?
No, it didn't show anybody.
It was published in the paper the next day, Mr. Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
And we showed a picture. We published a picture that was a better picture taken by a press photographer, which showed no one in the window.
I see. So then that picture is valueless then.
It's a bunch of nonsense.
We could publish all the pictures, I suppose, that were taken that day, but what would that prove?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take the next call then. This is Harv Morgan. You're in contact. Go ahead, please.
Oh, hello. May I ask a couple of questions, please?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I was reading Mark Lane's book also, and the first one is that I believe Zapruder took pictures at the time of the parade, and the frames were taken to the FBI, given to the FBI.
No, they weren't.
Weren't they?
No, they were taken by the Secret Service.
Secret Servicemen. When Zapruder got them back, there were a few frames missing, and one of the frames was missing.
Ma'am, I think you're mistaken. He didn't get them back at any time.
He sold the original to Life magazine for something like $500,000.
All right. Well, there's one point I'm trying to make, that some of the frames were missing, and one of them, the frames missing, shows that there was a tree at the time that our late President Kennedy's car went by. Therefore, Oswald could not have killed the president because of the tree in the way.
No, I'm sorry. The fact of the matter is that there are in the actual exhibit volume itself, and I think it's in volume 18 of the 26 volumes. The Zapruder film, it was broken up frame by frame, and it appears consecutively from the time the motorcade. I think it starts at frame 170 or something like that. And it goes down frame by frame all the way through until after the headshot and some frames after that. Now, in the report itself, it certainly is true that there are 4 or 5 frames missing in the actual commission exhibit volume.
Well, actually, published in the final report.
The ones that were published, that's right. Now, and it's clear that the frame was spliced, I think it was frame 210 or something like that, or 212.
212, yes.
Frame 212. Now, the way that's been told, and I've made an effort to find out what happened, because certainly the commission, it's obvious that the commission had these missing frames, because one of these missing frames is printed at another place in the report itself.
Mm-hmm. So frame 210.
That's right, it's frame 210, and it's clear, because in the pictures that are put in there of the reenactment that the commission conducted, frame 210 is included. So that proves conclusively that the commission had at least one of these missing frames, and it's quite clear that we had them all because we all looked at them.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find out why they weren't printed?
No, I don't know why they weren't printed. It's been explained to me by Life magazine that apparently the frames that were printed in the report were made up by Life magazine from the original. And when Life magazine made up these frames, or the prints from which the frames were made, they dropped the 5 frames inadvertently. Now, the commission had a copy that they got directly from the Secret Service, which the Secret Service got from Zapruder on the day of the assassination. And probably frame 210 that's reproduced came from that frame. Now, it's clear that the commission saw the whole film. There's nothing about a tree that was in the way. It doesn't show that at all, because the missing frames, during the missing frames here, the president's car was behind a sign, so you couldn't see the president's car.
Okay, we'll have to continue discussing this point a little later. Right now, I must take this break.
You're listening to Black Op Radio.
Once again, this is Harv Morgan Contact. Tonight, in defense of the Warren Commission, as I mentioned at the outset of this program, there's been a rash of critics stepping to the fore during the course of the last few months. Among them, Mark Lane, Edward Epstein, Penn Jones, etc. And we thought it about time that the people who worked on and put together the report of the Warren Commission on the assassination of President Kennedy could also be heard. So being heard tonight with their views and answering your questions, Mr. Albert Jenner, Chicago attorney and senior counsel member for the Warren Commission, Mr. Joseph Ball, Los Angeles attorney, and Professor Wesley Liebeler, UCLA law professor. All 3 of these gentlemen were staff counsels on the Warren Commission. Mr. Ball is the former president of the California State Bar Association. Mr. Jenner is a former president of the Illinois State Bar Association, both gentlemen having served in the past or coming up in the future. In Mr. Ball's case, the president of the American College of Trial Lawyers. And let's get to your calls at 982-7012. First, let me check in with Los Angeles after this long delay. Gentlemen, are you still with us?
Yes, we are.
Fine. Next caller, please. 982-7012. This is Harv Morgan. You're in contact. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. There was some discussion earlier about the bullet that went through President Kennedy and Governor Connolly and what happened at the autopsy and how this was analyzed. And I would like to focus particularly on the reporting by the FBI of the autopsy. As I understood it, the FBI agents who were at the autopsy reported that the bullet did not exit. And this is what Dr. Humes thought apparently at the beginning of the autopsy, but they changed their mind later. Now, as Mr. Epstein points out, 2 later FBI reports December 9th and I believe January 13th, went back to this original statement by the FBI men at the autopsy that the bullet did not exit, which completely contradicted the autopsy report itself, which was written by Dr. Humes a couple of days later. What I'd like to know is, what explanation is there for the fact that the FBI did, such an inadequate job of reporting what happened at the autopsy?
Well, whether the FBI has answered this question by saying that it's perfectly possible that the autopsy report did not get in their hands prior to the time it made its first report, and it's also perfectly clear that it did not.
That's true.
The FBI received the autopsy report, I think, on December
20th.
20th or 23rd.
I was told the 20th.
The autopsy report was turned over to the Secret Service.
Yes, and it got to the FBI on December 20th or 23rd. I thought it was the 23rd. So that explains...
the first
certainly it's true that Commander Humes initially held the hypothesis that the bullet had entered the back of the neck and had not exited because, of course, at that time, as you must be well aware, he did not know of the existence of a bullet wound in the throat, in the front part of the throat, because that had been obliterated by the tracheotomy that the doctors performed at Parkland Hospital. So between the time that he conducted the basic work of the autopsy and the time he talked to Dr. Perry and learned of this wound in the throat, the FBI agents left and they made their report. And their report indicated, it is quite clear, that the original hypothesis was that the bullet did not exit. The FBI never ceased to rely on that report. Now, the December 9th FBI report is perfectly understandable why they didn't reflect the findings of the autopsy report, because they didn't even have it then. And then there's January 13th report. All we can say at that point is that the guy who wrote, the FBI agent who rewrote the supplementary FBI report on January 13th was not aware of the findings of the autopsy at that time. And that's just a fact that the FBI overlooked this and carried the error through their two reports.
Well,
go ahead.
This does seem to be, a rather major fact, and there's an appendix on speculations of and rumors, which is said to intended to clarify the most widespread factual misunderstandings. Now, I think this is important, and apparently someone did too, because it says, speculation, a bullet was found on the stretcher used for President Kennedy at Parkland Hospital, which is, one of the things the FBI assumed when they made the report. What I'd like to know is, why can't you tell from reading the Warren report itself that the FBI had submitted two reports to the commission that were so completely wrong on such a major issue? This is just not present in the Warren report. It looks like...
we didn't rely on FBI reports for our evidence. Well, when I arrived in Washington on January 6th, I read the FBI report, and a week later I read the supplemental report. But in conducting my part of the investigation, I didn't rely upon the FBI report at all. I drew my own conclusions from the facts. Now, you take the autopsy report. We drew our conclusions from the autopsy report, the testimony of Commander Humes and the two other autopsy surgeons. We didn't rely upon the testimony of a policeman, what he overheard or what he observed for the short time he was in the autopsy room.
That's pure hearsay.
We felt that we should rely upon the testimony of doctors. Now, there's a lot of nonsense in Epstein's speculation that something we did to get that the first autopsy report was not the original report. I can assure you that it was. From my own personal knowledge, that is the only autopsy report I ever saw, and I was one of the first lawyers in Washington.
Well, why wasn't this discussed in the Warren report at length?
Let me try to respond to that.
Yes.
Okay. I think the reason that it wasn't is because it just, very frankly, and I, of course, I can't see you. I can only respond by the way I hear your voice. But I think you're asking a serious question, and I try to answer you in a serious way, as we always do. It seems to me that the reason we didn't talk about this is because it just didn't seem important to anybody. Because the whole notion, the whole existence of this statement in the original FBI summary report, which did not involve the FBI investigations, you see, the investigative report. It was just a very short, brief summary report that was written by some guy in the FBI who was, in a sense, trying to do in a very short period of time, in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months, the job that the commission took 9 months to do. Nobody paid any attention to it.
Well, I thought it was of principal importance. Isn't that what the commission said?
No, it was not of principal importance.
We paid no attention to the FBI report at all.
Not the summary report.
The summary report. Oh, of course, the investigations we course, summary report of the FBI that he's talking about was no factor in our investigation.
That's right. Now, that's simply a fact. I know I came down there, I read it through once, I threw it aside, and I never looked at it again.
I've never seen the first one since January 6th, the day I read it.
Is that just with respect to the autopsy, or does that also...
No,
the entire FBI report.
The conclusions of the FBI.
Now, you must distinguish here, you must differentiate in your mind between the investigative report that the FBI made, which is an actual statement of the interviews conducted by the individual agents. These reports ran into thousands and thousands of pages.
Right.
Distinguish that from the summary report, which didn't run more than a couple of hundred typewritten pages, which was very hurriedly put together on the basis of incomplete investigations that had been conducted at the time. Now, why should the commission pay attention to that?
Well,
that was our job.
That's a good question, but the report says, quote, of principal importance was the 5-volume report of the Federal Bureau of Investigation submitted on December 9th, 1963, which summarizes. Do you think that's not an accurate statement?
It's not an accurate statement. That's quite right.
I say, well, that's... I think that answers.
You want to get right down to the hard-nosed facts as to why it's there? I suppose nobody wants to pick on the FBI any more than you have to. Let's face it. Why dredge up the mistakes of the FBI if they're not relevant to what's going on? And if they're not, and if you know what the facts are, you go ahead and set forth the facts.
Well, we didn't prevent the FBI to draw our conclusions.
Certainly not.
Ourselves.
Certainly not.
All right, thank you for calling. We'll have that next call in just a moment at 982-7012 this evening in defense of the Warren Commission. This is KCBS AM and FM, the voice of San Francisco. In defense of the Warren Commission tonight, let's have that next call at 982-7012. This is Harv Morgan. Contact.
Mr. Liebeler. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
How long are we going to go?
We're going until 11:30, sir.
Oh, we can't go that long.
Not 11:30.
No, we've got to go to bed. We're working people.
Well, so am I.
12:30 my time.
Pardon me?
It's 10:30. I got to go home. I've got to work tomorrow.
It's 12:30 my time.
Did you not, gentlemen, know the time of the broadcast?
Well, I didn't know it was going to be until 11:30.
Didn't know it was going to be out.
Yes, sir. I thought that we specified this at the beginning of the program. Now, am I to understand that at this point that you would care to go no further?
No.
Oh, we'll go on a while, but my land is pretty...
We don't want to go to 11:30.
Listening to those commercials.
Yeah, we don't enjoy the commercials too much.
Well, the commercials are a part of radio and a part of television, and also the fact that the Warren Commission has been, as you gentlemen well know, well criticized. Now, if you would like to call it quits right now, we can certainly do so.
No, we'll go a little while longer.
All right, let's have the next call. 982-7012. Go ahead, you're in contact, sir.
Mr. Liebeler.
Yes.
I'd like to direct my questions primarily to you.
Yes.
On September 25 or 26 of 1963, 2 Cubans and an American visited Mrs. Odio in Dallas.
Yes.
One of these Cubans was known as Leopoldo, the other one possibly as Angelo, and the American was introduced as Leon Oswald.
Yes.
The following day, Leopoldo phoned Mrs. Odio and said that the American, namely Leon Oswald, had suggested assassinating the president. Now, I have 3 questions. Number 1, do you think that this person introduced as Leon Oswald was, in fact, Lee Harvey Oswald, or do you think it was someone impersonating him? And number 2, let's see, I forgot my second question.
Well, he's addressed the question to me, but of course he's articulated a sub-assumption here that we'll have to deal with first.
Well, you're going to answer, Jim, as well. I appreciate that.
Go ahead.
All right. Number 2.
The question is, was this person who was introduced as Leon Oswald actually Oswald or somebody impersonating him? That's probably the second question, isn't it? Somebody impersonating him?
No, that was still the first question.
All right.
The second question is, regardless of which is the case, does this not suggest a conspiratorial relationship, at least peripheral to, if not directly connected with the assassination? And number 3 was in connection with a memorandum prepared by Hubert and Griffin for the CIA concerning Ruby and his associates and so on. And one of the men listed there was a Leopold Ramos Ducos. I'd like to know if this was Leopoldo, because it mentions under his name concerning the Odio incident. It also mentions something in connection with Ruby's connections with the anti-Castro group and procurement of arms. It seems to refer to the Nancy Rich testimony, although there's no reference in her testimony to Leopoldo.
Well, now you're talking about a preliminary memorandum that Griffin and Hubert prepared. It was actually in February or March.
Yes.
And, of course, Mrs. Odio's testimony hadn't been taken at that time, nor had the testimony of Mrs. Rick, so there's no possibility of cross-reference at that point, unless they had the investigative reports in front of them.
I presume they had FBI reports at that time.
All right. Now, the first question is whether it was Oswald or someone else.
Yes.
I'm not convinced that in fact, there was anybody in Sylvia Odio's apartment, as she stated. That's point one.
Well, you think, then, that Mrs. Odio either imagined this incident, as did also her sister, even though Manuel Rye said that she was a reliable person?
Just a moment, sir. Let's get the answer now.
Who said she was a reliable person?
Manuel Rye.
Yeah.
As well as several other people.
I said I'm not convinced that anybody came there, but I'm inclined to believe Mrs. Odio's testimony in certain respects. And let me be more precise. I'm not convinced that there was anybody there who was introduced as Leon Oswald. Period. I'm not convinced there was anybody that was introduced as Leon Oswald, because Annie Lee Odio did not testify to that, did she?
You mean Mrs. Odio's sister?
Yes, Annie Lee.
I don't recall if she did or not.
No, she didn't. She said that there were 3 people came there, and Sylvia said that one of them was introduced as Leon Oswald.
They both identified him as Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, yes. They both said they thought that it resembled pictures of Lee Harvey Oswald. I took, as you probably well know, I took Mrs. Odio's testimony. And spent considerable time discussing this with her in Dallas. I don't think that Lee Oswald was there. For many reasons. Basically, because it was almost impossible for him to have been there as a physical matter. He was in transit at that time from New Orleans to Mexico City and crossed the border. You're probably familiar with the time sequence.
Yes, I noticed a tight schedule there.
Very tight schedule. It would have been almost impossible. If he'd have gone on an airplane and gone from New Orleans to Dallas, he could have done it. But
couldn't they have driven?
The airline manifest for that, and there was no indication.
Couldn't they have driven from New Orleans as the men said they did, or as Mrs. Odio said they said?
Pardon?
Couldn't they have driven from New Orleans as Mrs. Odio said that they said they did?
They would have had to have moved very rapidly to do so. And then Oswald was later seen on a bus, and it was identified as having been on a bus and crossed the border into Laredo. And in order to have gotten on that bus, obviously he would have had to have bought a bus ticket from Dallas. And there was no indication. We checked the bus sales of bus tickets in Dallas, and there was no indication. In fact, it was quite clear that no bus tickets had been sold from Dallas to Laredo or Mexico City that night. Now, I suppose you can make the hypothesis that he bought a bus ticket for somewhere else and then got off and bought another ticket. But and how far do you pursue these things? But in any event, no bus tickets were sold in Dallas to either Laredo or Mexico City at that time.
Okay, sir. Thank you for calling. And
all of it. Well. All right. Thank you for calling. We've just started to discuss this question.
All right. Go ahead.
Go ahead. It's your move.
Oh, my move. Well, then your answer to the first part of it is that.
Do I think it was Oswald? No, I don't think it was Oswald.
And you don't think he was introduced as Leon?
Pardon?
You don't think he was introduced?
There was nobody else impersonating him because that whole notion seems to me falls on his face. This was at the end of September, which is over 2 months before the assassination, and anybody that would be going around impersonating Oswald in Sylvia Odio's apartment at that point, I can't imagine any conceivable purpose that would be served by that.
No, and there was no notion that the president was even coming to Dallas at that particular time.
It had been in the paper on September 13, I believe.
Well, I think that's right. But the fact of the matter is that the notion was at that point that Oswald was going to be in Cuba. Isn't that right?
That's right.
That's what he was proposing to do. He was going to go to Cuba and stay there. So how are they trying to inculpate or frame somebody in Dallas on November 22nd when there was no notion? In fact, the whole notion was contrary. But Oswald was not going to be in Dallas on November 22nd. He was on his way to Cuba.
Well, purportedly, anyhow.
Anyhow, that's right. I mean, purportedly, that's what he told his wife. He went to Mexico City. He went to the Soviet embassy and tried to get to Cuba. He went to the Cuban embassy and tried to get to Cuba. And I mean, there's 3 different confirmatory events here involved in his attempt to get to Cuba.
Well, there are other arguments to raise there, but how about the last part of it concerning Leopold Ramos Ducos?
Well, what about Leopold Ramos Ducos? He was involved. Wasn't he a character involved in the anti-Castro operations at one point or other? I'm not really that familiar with that aspect of it.
Well, I don't know either. I've only seen reference to him in this one place, and of course all the FBI reports are not indexed. It says here that his life was threatened by a person suggesting that the same group that would kill Ducos had been responsible for getting rid of Kennedy.
Well, who said that?
Apparently he did. This is in this memorandum to the CIA. I quoted from that.
Oh, that was the one with the Griffin Hubert memorandum?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm just not that familiar with this fellow Ramos Ducos. I checked out the stories from the Odio end, and I didn't run across, as far as I can recall, his name from that end of the story.
Well, okay, then was Leopoldo ever identified?
No, he wasn't. And you're familiar with the rest of that story, I'm sure.
The three people the FBI thought may have been involved and then turned out not to have been.
That's right. But the commission had concluded, on the basis of other evidence, that Oswald had not been there at that time. Now, I'll go a step further with you. Even if Oswald had been there, and I don't think he was, but even if he had been there, the next question is, what's that got to do with the assassination of the president 2 months later? And I'm at a loss to make that leap, even if I'm willing to admit, which I'm not, and I'm honestly not. I really don't think Oswald was there, and I went into great detail with Mrs. Odio on this question. I think she has her own problems and her own motivations for this story. But what would this have to do with the assassination in any way?
Well, you think she has something to gain by telling this story?
Yes, I do.
Well, let's get back to that. What would this have to do with the assassination, sir, in your mind?
Well, allegedly, this Oswald, this, of course, is third-hand information, but allegedly he had suggested assassinating the president, so there was something there, and also that he did have certain affiliations with other people and activities getting arms to go to Cuba.
No, this had nothing to do with arms to Cuba.
Yes, I believe it did.
It had nothing to do with...
You're listening to Black Op Radio.
Next caller, please. 982-7012. This is Harv Morgan. You're in contact.
Hello,
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question. Now, in the testimony, in Mark Lane's book, he says that there was an eyewitness, a Mr. Brennan, who was seated on a wall 120 feet from the school book depository. Now, upon hearing the first shot, Mark Lane stated that Brennan stated that he jumped from the wall and ran for cover. Now, Mr. Brennan, according to Mark Lane, has poor eyesight, and he stated that he had seen a man up in the 6th floor southeast window with a rifle. Now, the Dallas police said that this, from Mr. Brennan, they got the description which they sent out. And he described him as being so tall and all the whatever the description was that sent out. I don't remember it right now. But when they went up to investigate the room, it showed that whoever at the window had to be seated. And the question was raised, how could he judge how tall he was if he was seated? Now, on Houston Street, much closer to the building, was a young couple, a man and his wife.
No, they were much farther away.
They were much
away, and Brennan was right across the street.
That's Roland.
Roland was a block away.
Yeah, Roland.
Yeah.
Well,
Also, Brennan didn't run.
Brennan sat right up there and watched it all. Then he went across after the shooting and told the policeman he had seen a man shoot from the window.
And another thing about Brennan's poor eyesight, that's one of Mr. Lane's misstatements. Mr. Brennan was far-sighted, which means that he could see that 120 feet better than persons who had normal eyesight or were nearsighted. He didn't have defective eyesight at all.
I never saw any evidence Brennan...
Well, I'm just taking it from what was in the book.
In the Mark Lane book, you mean?
Yes, taken from Mark Lane's book. Now,
and that is the purpose of this program, so that, we can answer some of these allegations made by a gentleman like that.
All Brennan said was that he saw somebody fire from the 6th floor, from that window up there.
Just a minute, sir. Hold it. You're getting an answer now. Wait a minute.
He said he saw somebody fire from up there. And he gave a general description to the Dallas Police Department. It was a very general description.
Immediately after the event, Jim.
Pardon?
Right
after the event. He walked right over and gave a general description. Now, it certainly is true that Brennan said that he thought the man was standing in the window, and that's explained in the report. It's very easy to mistake a man who's standing from a man who's sitting, but presumably Brennan saw enough of it so that he could give this description. The windowsills are very low in that building, but the fact of the matter is that Brennan did give this description. And it did go out over the radio. Now, how he got it, maybe he made it up. I don't know.
Well, Jim,
but he
testified he saw the man standing in the window before the motorcade.
Yeah, that's right.
He was standing there.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have that next call in a moment at 982-7012. Next caller, please. This is Harv Morgan. You're in contact.
Hello, Art Morgan. And gentlemen of the Warren Commission, I respect all the work that you've had to do on this particular job, but as all I've heard is criticism from Lane and Jones and Epstein and these various people. Now, one of the points that I was very curious about was this idea of the timing that they seem to bring out so assuredly, that Oswald could not have gone from the building, got into a bus, and assuming that he didn't have a collaborator, and or a car, according to Dallasites, that he couldn't have gone over to a certain part of town, gone to his rooming house, killed Officer Tippit, got to the theater. That this was physically impossible geographically in the city of Dallas. And second of all, that it's rather odd that no one in the Dallas Police Department, or, as you say, FBI observers, took one note, or I've never even heard a quote of what went on in the interrogation. Thank you.
Well, first of all, the first question is whether or not he had time to go from the building to his rooming house. He arrived at his rooming house about 1 o'clock, and the president was assassinated at about 12:30. Now, there isn't any question that he could get to his rooming house in the way that he traveled. He walked about 7 blocks and took a bus. Now, we know he took the bus. He was identified there on the bus by a former landlady. In addition to that, he got off the bus when the traffic became heavy and the bus was not moving, and he got a transfer. And that transfer was found in Oswald's pocket when he was arrested. And it was identified as a transfer that had to be given by that bus driver at that point at that time. Now, he walked a block or two away down from the bus stop to a Greyhound station and took a taxi cab. And the taxi cab driver drove Oswald to a point past his rooming house.
And the taxi driver identified.
Well, now the distance, I'm talking only about the distance from that point to Oswald's home is very short. It's not very far in the way of miles. You can make it I forget the exact timing, but I think 7 or 8 minutes, the most 10.
Well, Joe, didn't you pace that off?
Well, I did. I left the Texas School Book Depository myself with a stopwatch, and I walked the distance to the place he took the bus. Then went back to the place for the bus stop where he got off the bus. We walked down to the taxi cab, got in this same taxi cab with this same driver, drove down to the place where the taxi driver said that he'd stopped, walked back to Oswald's home, timing ourselves with a stopwatch, and we easily made it within that time. Oswald went in. He was identified by the lady that worked there. He went in to his room. He rushed out with putting on a coat. And then he had to walk down to a point, I would say a little better than a mile from his rooming house. We stepped that off ourselves with a stopwatch. I think we made that from walking the longest distance. There were 2 ways you could go, a short distance and a long distance. We walked that in, I believe, 12 or 14 minutes. At 1:16, Officer Tippit was killed. So there's no question in the timing that he could do it. He could do it very easily.
Mr. Lane.
Dallas are not great as they are in Los Angeles.
Mr. Lane makes much of the fact in his book, or the information in his book, that the man who called the police on Officer Tippit's radio actually waited 4 or 5 minutes before making that call, rather than doing it immediately as put forward in the report. And therefore, he feels that this would subtract about 4 or 5 minutes from that time and make the shooting of Officer Tippit at about 1:10 or 1:11.
The witness who testified to that said, I waited a few minutes before I went over there. Now, you know how a witness is, and he takes that literally. Actually, what happened is that everything moved fast. After Oswald shot Tippit, he ran from the scene across the lawn, emptying his gun and reloading it. And then as soon as he had left the car, this witness came over and got on the police radio and called.
Mm-hmm.
Taxi driver, wasn't he?
No, he was he worked down at the used car lot just a block away.
I think Lane and two more of the critics have made mention of the testimony, I believe, it was Earlene Roberts, who said that at the time that Oswald was back at his house changing clothes, that a police car came up out front and honked the horn as if to signal. Was there any evidence of that?
She didn't say as if to signal. So all the evidence on that was that she says that a police car went by and there were two policemen in it and it honked the horn.
That's all.
That's all she said. Now, she said she also gave a number on it, and we traced down all the police cars in Dallas with that number or any other number, for that matter. And
we found no such number.
No such number and no police car in the area, except obviously there was one police car in the area.
And surmising from that it was a signal was just that, a surmise, huh?
Yes. Well, no, she did not say it was a signal.
No, I say that some of the critics have.
Well, that's what they said.
Yeah.
She said that there were many policemen. She knew some policemen in the force. They sometimes went by and beeped their horn. Now,
I see.
The only thing we can say about that is that we checked out the police cars, and there were no police cars in that area at the time.
Okay, right back in just a moment.
You're listening to Black Op Radio.
Once again, this is Harv Morgan Contact. Just a brief reminder that tomorrow night, because of the election, we will not be on the air. Back with you again on Wednesday night at the regular time, 8:35 until 11:30. Now, because so many of you have been patient and waiting on the contact line, we'll try in the remaining time to devote as much time as possible to your calls. 982-7012. This is Harv Morgan. You're in contact.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, please.
I have a question to you, gentlemen.
Oh, let me just say, I didn't at the outside. Thank you, sir, for directing your question to the gentleman who happened to be Mr. Albert Jenner, the former president of the Illinois State Bar Association and past president of the American College of Trial Lawyers, Mr. Joseph Ball, who is the former president of the California State Bar and currently the president-elect of the American College of Trial Lawyers, and Mr. Wesley J. Liebeler, professor of law at UCLA in Los Angeles. All three gentlemen were, of course, former counsels on the Warren Commission. Now, go ahead, sir, with your question.
Very well. My question is, did you gentlemen set out with your job by assuming nobody guilty and nobody innocent?
Yes, very much so, sir.
You did?
Yes.
Nobody in the commission assumed the guilt of Lee Harvey Oswald?
We were told, as we reached Washington, before we reached Washington, that there were no assumptions and that we should investigate as fully, directly as we could and expose anything and anybody.
In other words, you would just look at the facts as they would be presented by witnesses, etc.,
yes,
and then draw your conclusions from that.
Very much so.
Now, let me ask you a question in this connection. When the governor of Texas testified that he heard the first shot, he turned around and he disclaims the fact that he was hit by that first shot that hit Kennedy.
No. He does not disclaim that, sir.
He does not disclaim?
No, that's what Mr. Lane says, but Mr. Lane does not tell the truth.
No, I'm not, I don't know what Mr. Lane says, frankly.
The governor did not.
I'm referring to the Warren report, which I've read, the popular version.
Good. The governor does not so testify.
Which says that the governor's testimony at this point is considered erroneous. This doesn't appear in Mr. Mark Lane's book.
No.
It's in the Warren report.
All right, just a moment, sir. Go ahead.
Now,
go ahead.
Not you, sir.
It's the Warren report that dismisses the testimony as correct as regards the statement by the governor that he was not hit by the first bullet.
All right, so let's get an answer on that. Just a moment.
He did say that, but he didn't say he was not hit by the first bullet that hit the president, and that's what point I'm trying to make to you.
Yes, but you see, he turned around as the president got hit and clutched his hands with his throat.
No, he did not say that. He did not say that. Go back and read his testimony. He never said that. He said he heard a shot and he turned around. He did not say that he saw the president hit or had any other evidence of the fact that the president was hit. Now, that's a fact, because I've looked at this question very closely. He never said that. He said
then what does the report mean when it says that this testimony is erroneous by the governor?
I don't know. I don't recall that it does say that. I think that's what the report says is.
Well, then of course we can't argue on this point.
Sir, do you have the copy of the report right there with you?
Let me ask you. Let's go to the next question then.
Just a moment, sir. Let's resolve this.
Report here.
Pardon me?
We have the report. If the gentleman has that before him, tell us what page it is.
Do you have the page, sir?
No, I'm referring to the popular version that came out, the short version, in which now. I cannot argue this point, since you say that the report does not argue with the governor of Texas on the point of the bullets.
No, it doesn't. Because you see, let me go on in just a moment about this.
Yes, please.
This is quite consistent with the proposition that the first shot missed. That the governor heard the first shot fired, the first shot missed, then he turned around when he heard the first shot, and as he started to turn back again to his left, then the second shot was fired, which he did not hear, obviously, because he was hit in the meantime. And the second shot hit the president, went through the president's body, hit the governor.
Right.
I think that's exactly what happened.
I see.
But
let me ask you.
Let me ask just a moment, sir. Didn't the governor say though that he felt that he was not hit by the same bullet that hit President Kennedy?
I don't. Yes, now, just a minute. He did not testify to that. He never stated that on the record at any time. Now, I don't know what the governor has said in television appearances or to the press, but he did not testify to that, and that's all I know.
Okay.
I don't watch the governor of Texas on television.
Now, let me ask you then, does the commission have the material evidence, like the bullet, with traces of blood from the two, Kennedy and the governor?
Yes.
And the bullet and the blood traces are evidence?
That's bullet 399. It was found in the governor's stretcher. Now.
Yeah. Does it show any traces of Kennedy's tissues?
Well, no, you can't know. You can't.
How do you mean? Oh, yes, you can know. Oh, no. I'm sorry. You can know that.
Well, there was no evidence on the.
There's
bullet.
no evidence to that.
There was no evidence in the bullet.
I see. Thank you. Now let me ask you the question about the rifle test.
Okay. But you haven't let me answer this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's no way that I know of in which you can distinguish the president's tissue from anybody else's tissue, and I don't know what kind of tissue clings to a bullet.
Oh, yes, you can take tests in that respect on chemical reactions to various blood groups, etc.
Well, but there wasn't that much material on the bullet.
Yeah.
Wasn't that possible?
You don't need very much to.
High-powered rifle.
Well, there certainly wasn't on this one. I don't know about bullets and high-powered rifles. I know about this bullet, a Commission Exhibit 399. There wasn't that much material on that bullet to make this kind of determination, if it can be made at all. I don't want to argue that because I don't know about it.
Well, it wasn't made anyway.
Now, let me ask you something regarding the rifle test. The commission tried to establish that a man like Oswald could perform the feat, and it hired expert marksmen to do the same job. Now, were these marksmen asked to fire from that 6-story depository building?
No.
No.
What?
They answer that is no. They fired from the tower at the Aberdeen Proving Ground.
They did not.
We can't quite hear you unless you speak right into the mouthpiece.
I'm shouting.
Not you, sir. I'm talking to the gentleman in Los Angeles.
They weren't asked to fire.
That's better. Fine.
They were asked to fire from a tower up at the Aberdeen Proving Ground or at the.
I see.
The Aberdeen Proving Ground.
Were they asked to shoot at a moving target?
No, they were asked to shoot at 3 targets that were spaced in the same manner as though as though one target was moving. And
they were still targets, were they not?
Spaced in such a way, yes, that's right.
They were still targets. Have you been in the Army, sir?
Yes.
Which is more difficult, to hit a moving target or a still target?
It depends on which way it's moving. If it's moving straight away from you, there's not much difference, is there?
No. Just I don't know how much difference.
There's no difference.
There's no difference. There's no difference.
If the target is moving slowly, directly away from you on a line,
there's absolutely no difference.
There's very little difference.
There's little difference. Is it a little more difficult or a little less difficult?
I would think it would be a little more difficult.
Now, why did the commission not simulate the whole series as closely as possible and made it, in fact, a little more easy? Why?
Well,
Well, what question are you? What? I don't.
Just tell me.
Well, what? How are you going to?
Now you just, gentlemen.
Because it was probably too difficult to set up a moving target under the circumstances of.
Sir, we just established that it's a little more easy.
No, sir. You missed the point of the answer. He said it's more difficult to set up the circumstances of a moving target, which would be difficult indeed.
No. I asked if it's more difficult to hit a moving target or a still target, and we established that it's a little more difficult to hit a moving target.
We did set up a similar. We shot with a camera from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository toward a moving target, and we had the sight along the gun. So in that way, we did.
Oswald didn't shoot with a camera. Now look.
Sir, I must interrupt because we can only devote a certain amount of time to each of the calls on the air. In the remaining time, we have many people who have been waiting. So unless there's something additional to add, gentlemen, we'll take the next call, okay?
Well, this is one of the problems with a program like this, because the guy raises a question and you never get a chance to answer.
Well, now that the question has been raised and he's no longer on the line, I think we can better answer it uninterruptedly. So let's deal with it now.
Well, the point is that the commission did set up a situation that was quite similar to the moving target by using 3 still targets. And as I've indicated, it might be somewhat easier to hit a still target, but when the target is moving slowly away in a direct line, as this one was, very slightly curving to the right, there's not very much difference. And I want to know whether he's asking the question of the amount of, as to the accuracy involved or the time sequence involved. The accuracy is a very subjective thing, and there may have been a good deal of luck involved in the shot. The time sequence is a different matter, and the time sequence was clearly established that there was plenty of time to make these shots. I've always taken the position that the best evidence that you could hit this target in the way from the 6th floor of the building is that, in fact, that's what happened. In fact, it was a very easy shot, and that's, in fact, exactly what did happen on the basis of all kinds of other evidence.
It was an easy shot?
Yes, it was an easy shot. Of course, it's a simple shot. It's less than 200 feet away.
Well, with this in mind, then, this seems to be the point that so many of the critics are seizing upon, that people on the commission say it's an easy shot, and yet we're unable to find anyone who could duplicate it.
Well, unable to find anybody to duplicate it. There are all kinds of people who duplicated it.
That isn't true.
Everybody.
No, I say these are the criticisms made, but these criticisms are invalid, you feel?
Well, I'm not. Yes, that's right. I'm not responsible for the criticism. The fact is that all these people ought to go up there and look out the window and see what an easy shot it is. It's like shooting. Well, it's a very easy shot.
All right, we'll have that next call coming up in just a moment on Contact. 18 now, past 11 o'clock. Next caller, please. Go ahead, you're in Contact.
Yes, I'd like to address my questions to both Mr. Jenner and Mr. Liebeler.
All right.
Mr. Jenner, you made a statement that the Bogart testimony about the...
Sir, I'm sorry, I wasn't on the line. Go ahead. Start over again.
Go ahead, sir.
All right, I'd like to address my questions to both Mr. Jenner and Mr. Liebeler.
Right.
All right, Mr. Jenner?
Yes, sir?
Yes. Now, you made a statement in rejecting the testimony of Bogart that none of the people who were interviewed, that's Mr. Pizzo and Mr. Wilson, who were present during the time that Bogart made this admission about somebody who was driving a car, allegedly Oswald. You said that none of these people could corroborate his statement, but you yourself interviewed Mr. Pizzo, and in his testimony he indicates that when Oswald was picked up as the suspect in the assassination, Pizzo made the comment, well, there goes his prospect. And he said that several people were standing around.
You mean Bogart?
No, I'm talking about Mr. Pizzo. Mr. Pizzo made that comment. That's in the testimony that is printed in the volumes that was testified to, and the deposition was taken by Jenner himself. So it is not correct to say that none of the witnesses who were standing around did not corroborate him.
Well, it was a question of corroboration of the claim that he had a card and he threw it away, is what I recalled. I took Bogart's deposition and Jenner took the boss, Pizzo. And no one would corroborate Bogart with the fact that he had a card with Oswald's name on it.
Yeah, you couldn't find the card. Isn't that quite different from saying that nobody could corroborate it?
Corroborated the fact that he had it, or that he threw it away.
All Bogart testified was that he made a card and he threw it in the wastepaper basket. And then Pizzo testified they attempted to find it the next day when Bogart the next day said that he had the card and thrown it in the wastepaper basket. And nobody could find it.
Well, would you then be saying that Mr. Bogart just made this up out of thin air? Is this what you're saying? You are saying it. Oh, let me just ask you this then.
I'm not sure myself if that is true.
May I just ask you this question?
Sir, let me ask the caller, please, now. When we're trying to get an answer, we can't even hear Los Angeles unless you be quiet for a moment.
All right.
I suspect that there was somebody in there like this that maybe looked something like Oswald, and obviously there was somebody there who went in the automobile with the salesman.
Yes, and didn't this somebody also make a remark about the fact that he was going to, if he couldn't get satisfactory results here, he was going to go back to Russia?
No, I don't think I never heard anything like that. Well, I doubt very seriously that he did say that. I think there was...
Well, that's what Wilson said.
I know that that's what they testified to.
Well, an obvious thing is that somebody appeared there who wanted to buy a car and who made that statement. At least 3 people made the statement that somebody appeared to buy a car, and that one of them said that somebody said, I'm going to go back to Russia if I don't get satisfactory results.
Or go back to Russia or go to Russia.
Well, Jim,
go back to Russia is what he said.
That we established that testimony that Oswald was not in Dallas on that occasion.
No, that's the fact. Now, where do you go from there? Where do you go from there, sir? It was not Oswald. You're offering me the proposition it was somebody else?
I think that is the question, whether or not any of this, in fact, did happen, or is it just pure fabrication on the part of the witnesses who testified?
I don't think it's that.
No, I don't either. I think there was somebody there, and somebody may even have made this remark. But it wasn't Oswald, because he was somewhere else at the time, and it's perfectly clear that he was. Now, if this gentleman wants to offer the proposition that it was somebody else impersonating Oswald, then we can pursue that line again.
Nope. Instead, we'll have to pursue the next question at 982-7012. We'll have that in just 30 seconds. 22 now, past 11 o'clock. Let's have the next call. This is Harv Morgan. You're in contact.
Hello. I have some questions and comments for the commissioner. The questions posed and the contradictions raised by the critics of the commission are nagging at my conscience. I'm not a ballistics expert or a lawyer or any kind of detective, but these questions have been just bothering me. I don't have any peace when I think about the assassination because of these criticisms. Now, you gentlemen disclaim any credibility or reliability of these critics of the commission. And now the commission has been disbanded. Where do I, as a deeply concerned citizen, turn to resolve these seemingly contradictory evidences and conclusions? Since you seem so reluctant to come on programs such as this, and this is one of the few means that we have of answering many of these questions, and you seem reluctant to come on at all.
What makes you say that, ma'am?
Well, it was announced again and again that you were coming, and then it was postponed, and...
Well, that was primarily a question of getting dates that were available for both of us.
I've been on a series of television programs down here in Los Angeles, and I've been consistently challenging Mark Lane to debate these issues, and he's consistently refused. As a matter of fact, I'm going to New York on Wednesday night with Mr. Griffin from Cleveland to appear on a program that's going to go over the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Then
and Lane had agreed to go on that until he found out that I was going to be on it. Now he backs off and he won't show up.
Excuse me, but who am I speaking to now? Is this
Mr. Liebeler.
Mr. Liebeler, yes.
Hysteric, according to Mort Saul.
Now,
let her talk.
Mort Saul call you hysteric?
Yeah, he called me hysteric the other night because I won't answer questions.
He's a hysterical.
But let this young lady speak. She's deeply concerned about this, and I think she has the right to.
But you see, all of these people, Epstein and Mark Lane and Penn Jones, we hear these people. They're in the press. We have their books at our hands, and the Warren Commission. Now, I don't have enough time to read all of these things carefully, but I get enough, either in summaries or through skimming them myself, to know that there are a lot of questions that I need to have answered. Now, you say not to go to these people, not to listen to Mark Lane, that he's unreliable, that Epstein is saying incorrect things. Now, who am I to listen to? Should I write to you? Should the general public turn to you, members of a disbanded commission, for these questions? Should there be a second commission so that things can be more clearly stated, more definitively put, so that we can have some peace about this?
No, I suggest this. I'm running a seminar down here at UCLA. I'm in the faculty of law school here. At this point, I've got 23 students going through the criticism that's made of the report. And I'm in the process...
A little louder, please.
I've got 23 students going through basic points that have been raised by the critics. And I've been going through this material myself, and I'm in the process of writing a book. Now, I'm taking as much time as I can to appear on programs like this, which take away from the time that I should be working on this book. Now, this young lady, who sounds to me to be very seriously concerned about this and really honestly involved in this, if she has any questions about this, I suggest that she should write me a letter, and I will answer it, and I will answer her questions.
Is this Mr. Liebeler?
Yes, Professor Liebeler, School of Law, UCLA. And I'll make that offer to anyone. And to the extent that we can answer them without taking too much of our time, we will. And we will in any event.
May I ask you a question? Do you feel, now there's been quite a bit of controversy about this. President Johnson made a statement about a second commission the other day. It's seriously being considered or disregarded by lots of people. How do you feel about this? Do you think that there is a need, simply in light of all the controversy that's taken place and the fact that the general public is met with this deluge of criticisms and counterattacks and, your responses to everything? Wouldn't it be the best thing for all concerned if there was a second official investigation of this?
Well, I really don't think so, because I'll tell you, what is your name?
Pardon me?
What is your name?
Joan Prebrum.
Prebrum?
Prebrum.
Prebrum? Miss Prebrum?
Yes.
Miss Prebrum, I've been through Mark Lane's book, for example, and I've been through Epstein's book, and I've talked to Epstein about this at great length. And I'm satisfied in my own mind, and I'm asking in a sense to accept my own ability to admit if I was wrong or if the commission was wrong. Now, I'm not going to tell you that the Warren report is perfect in all respects, because it's not perfect. It's a human event like all other human events.
Yes, but wait a minute.
Let's finish the answer now.
But in terms of whether we need a new commission or not, I don't think we do, because I think that the record, certainly as far as Lane is concerned, I think consciously and deliberately has been wantonly distorted. And I think if you sit down and read his book without anything else at hand, you're obviously going to come away seriously doubting the work of the commission. Now,
I'm going to have to interrupt, man, because that is our time for this evening. Unfortunately, it has just flown by as far as I'm concerned. My thanks very much to those of you who called up and joined us on the air and got your questions answered, perhaps to your satisfaction, perhaps not. Apologies to those calls we could not get to. And my special thanks for the three former counsels for the Warren Commission, Mr. Joseph Ball, Mr. Albert E. Jenner, and Mr. Wesley J. Liebeler for joining us this evening on Contact. In defense of the Warren Commission, our Contact topic this evening. And my special thanks for research assistance to Harold Verber and Paul Hoke. This is Harv Morgan thanking you for joining us this evening, hoping you'll be with us on Wednesday, not tomorrow night, because tomorrow night KCBS concerning itself with the big election here in the state of California. Wednesday night at 8:35, I hope once again you'll be in Contact. Produced by Carl Young. Engineering this evening by Lowell Funston and Cecil Dutton.